everybody, it's your main man, Anthony Brogdon, coming at you strongly with a beautiful sister that's going to blow your mind. Watch out. Let me tell you something. I just was talking to her and I said, hey, what you going to talk about? And she went off into the literature and the diaspora and Haiti. Y'all going to hear some of all that. This sister here, let me tell you, she is very well thought about in her circles. She the one. She's on my show, Strong Inspirations. I can't believe it. Let me tell you something. I forgot to tell you. My name is Anthony Brogdon because I'm excited to have this lady on here. We're going to throw down today. Y'all got to, man, sit down, sit still, be ready because it's coming at you strongly, straight no chaser. And so hit the subscribe button on Strong Inspiration. Hit the like button on this video because you're going to like it because watch, I'm telling you, the sister going to go deep on you. And I'm going to do my very best to get some deep questions. Watch that. And then hit the notifications bell for when the videos come up. You get a ding, a shock, a smoke signal. You get a tweet, something that tells you that there's new content on Strong Inspirations. And then tell somebody. Don't keep it to yourself. You running around here saying, let me tell you what I know. And you got it here. And then don't want to tell people where you got it from. This thing is for everybody, all around the world. I got people over in Africa and in the UK and Australia watching me. So let it flow, everybody. And then do this, my friends. Be more cognizant of your history. Do what you can to learn more. And I'm going to get into that just a second. But did you see the video? And I got to admit it. This has happened to me a couple times on the show. I interviewed the lady who's the first Black graduate of a high school in Gainesville, Florida. There was a Black and a white high school. Her father was the president of the local chapter at NAACP. He come up with, as was appropriate, the idea to integrate the schools. Now, it's 10 years after Brown v. versus Board of Education. This 1965. So she goes into the school the first day, them white kids ground around her and tell her, you ain't graduating with us. They put tacks in her chair, roaches and rats under her table. Well, that wasn't the worst of it. They beat her up one day. This one makes me cry. Y'all got to watch that one. They beat her up one day. She go in the principal's office. The principal's office, I didn't see nothing. I don't think. Maybe it happened at home. She stumbles across the street, calls her dad, take her to the hospital, the Black guy. My man says, hey, you need to take a few days off and heal. So she takes a few days off. Dad said, you ain't got to go back. She said, I'm going back. They can't stop me. You can't stop us. Watch what this lady got to tell you about what happened in Haiti and all this literature stuff and this writing, this chronicle and this information. You can't do that. We will not be denied. Watch that video. Did you see the one I did with the guy who, man, this is crazy. They had his grandfather at the tree with the rope around his neck and they let him go? Watch that video. Did you see the one where I did with the people that talk about who is the first Black in the NBA? I go all over the spectrum, everybody. I interviewed his son. Watch that video. How about the one I did with the guy who goes in them pyramids in Africa? And he wrote a book on it. He's an expert, gone for a bunch of years. He tells, let me say, this is what you see in those pyramids. Watch that video. I'm telling you, I'm coming at you, my friends. I'm going to keep coming at you with ladies like this who come on my show. All right, how about this one? If y'all don't know, I'm a filmmaker because I'm this serious. I'm going to give you this content one way or the other. This is one of the avenues. It's called Business in the Black. It's streaming on Amazon. It is very good. I took it to 40 cities across America on my own dime. I was like Johnny Appleseed, spewing that knowledge across America. They made me cry in Tulsa when they gave me a proclamation from the state of Oklahoma and the city of Tulsa. The room was packed. No one said a word while they watched my film, Little Old Me. Now, I took it to the next level. I wrote a book on it. You got to get you a copy of this book. Come on now. And it's very inexpensive because I really want you to have it. It's got more facts than the film. It's in written form, as you can understand, and it's very easy to read. I don't add no commentary. I just give you the fact and let it stand on its own merit. I'm in literature, everybody. Like this lady, I'm a literaturist, if there's such a word. Get you a copy of this book. This book is good. Every 10th book I sell, I donate one to a school. My goal is to donate thousands because I want the kids to hear this, to know this information about slaves who went to college. I tell you how slaves gained an education in the schools they went to. And it wasn't just HBCUs, but there were 3 of them open before slavery ended. Did you know that, my friends? And then another 3 opened in 1865. And then when the doors opened, we was jamming in. A whole bunch of them started coming up. And it's all in this book. Get you a copy of this book. Now, you hear me use this term strong a lot. Strong is my favorite word, everybody. I just love the word strong for what it means in my book, and that's strength, tenacity, resilience, and a sense of oneness, nobility, and grace. And that is my introduction to my guest today. Come on, Strong Soul Sister, let's get it on. Thank you for being on Strong Inspirations.
Thank you for having me.
What's your name?
So my name is Dr. Norrell Edwards. I got my PhD in 20th and 21st century Black diaspora literature from the University of Maryland, College Park.
All right, all right. That was big for you to get your doctorate, wasn't it? Was you excited?
I think by the end I was real tired.
Okay.
I was real tired, but I definitely was excited. It was a long time coming. It took me about 6.5 years or so to finish.
Yeah. And did you always want to get your doctorate?
Actually, no, I did not always want to get my doctorate. I had been in some programs in my undergraduate and my bachelor's degree that were, really geared towards diversifying the professoriate, right? So trying to get more Black professors. So they gave us a lot of opportunities to sort of like do research and work at colleges. So I did a summer at Princeton and a summer at Stanford University. And that was trying to, to kind of prepare me to apply to and to do research at sort of like the doctoral level. I had not always, I really think when I was in high school, I thought I wanted to run a nonprofit, and I think I still do. But honestly, if you go to a really good PhD program, it's funded. And I thought, oh, I love a free degree.
Yeah,
and
sure.
so I figured, why not? And, at that time, I started my PhD in 2013. So at that time, still pretty close to the 2008 recession. People were saying, it's hard to get a job. It's hard to get a job with a bachelor's, particularly for people from marginalized communities, for Black, Black and brown people. It's even harder, right, to get an entry-level job, right? I had a lot of friends who spent, 6 months or more unemployed. And so I figured, what's 5 more years getting a higher degree that might help me sort of in my long-term, income earning. So that's kind of how I stumbled across that path.
Did you get all A's in grade school and high school?
I did not get all A's, but I did very well. I was a real good student.
Yeah.
I always, loved to learn and, just was always kind of like in the books for sure.
Yeah, I love it. Okay, there's just a couple more before we get to the topic. And I do this with all my guests. And it's somewhat personal. Where were you born and raised?
So I am from New Rochelle, New York. So right outside of New York City, the suburbs.
Okay.
I'm really fond of my background. Sometimes I joke with people that I'm a Northern Negress. My family, the African American side of my family has been in New Rochelle for about 100 years. My grandmother was born in New Rochelle in 1924. My mom was born in New Rochelle. My sister, who's a bit older than me, also born in New Rochelle. We're all graduates of New Rochelle High School. My grandmother graduated class in 1944. In New Rochelle High School. And her mother, had come up in the Great Migration from North Carolina around probably like right after World War I. So like 19, 19-ish, 1920, because my grandmother was
Yes.
born in Norrell, 1924.
Yes. Okay. What was it? What was it a black community, a white community,
Well,
mixed?
so
What was
yeah, so
that like?
Norrell is a mixed community. I've done some activism work in Norrell over the last few years too. Is really interesting. Norrell at one point was known as the Harlem of Westchester County. So Norrell essentially, when people started moving out of New York City, Norrell was a town that people went to in the suburbs, and also sort of Black communities. What my great grandmother who'd come up from North Carolina was a domestic for the white for sort of like wealthier white families in the north side of town. But Norrell, it's so interesting. Growing up, I never learned really too much about any Black history in Norrell. But I would later find out that Norrell was founded with enslaved persons, and it's so crazy because Norrell really, when I was growing up, we always heard so much about Norrell's history in terms of like it's revolutionary histories. It's part in the Revolutionary War. Thomas Paine was in Norrell. The Huguenots had founded, these sort of like French, this French religious group, had founded Norrell. But you never learned, and only till recently, I only learned until recently that Norrell had been, founded with enslaved Africans and had a large number of enslaved Africans at that. And so it's really interesting the way those erasures happen in kind of like the history and the mythologizing of a space and place. Norrell is
Okay.
also sort of known at one point, talking about desegregation. Norrell had pushed back against busing and desegregation. And at one point, it was known as sort of like the Little Rock of the North. And that was around the time my mom was growing up, and she was bused to a white elementary school. I think maybe, I don't know when, but there had been an all Black elementary school that they had around the Lincoln Corridor, which is a historically Black area where my family had grown up, that had been sort of torn down. And then they had to sort of bus, right, post Board of Ed decision, but there was definitely a lot of resistance in the town.
Oh, okay. Is there uh, a black and white side of town, that kind of thing? The black people live in one area. There's a railroad track that divides, something like
Railroad
that.
track. So yeah, so the north side of town is considered historically much whiter, wealthier. The south side is more mixed. There's a historic side, a historic part. I'm not sure, coordinate wise where that is. That sort of is maybe a little bit more mixed. You have a sprinkling of sort of like well off, Black or sort of like maybe Latinx families these days. But even still, they're small in number. But historically, there have been sort of like a poorer Black community in Norrell, and now I think also like a lower income Latinx community that's sort of like around more like the South Side. But like many
Okay.
places in America, Norrell is gentrifying, and so those groups are being pushed out. In particular, they've been giving a lot of big contracts to bring new glassy high rise apartments. It's crazy. The downtown looks very, very different from when I was
Okay.
growing up and from like when my grandmother would take me to like the Woolworths and stuff like that.
Okay. Let me go back just a little, and you alluded to this earlier. Where is the enslavement in your family? Is that, I mean, what's the Southern connection? Where is that?
So my maternal grandmother is African American, and my maternal grandfather is Jamaican. And my grandmother's side, I mean, I actually don't know. Assumedly, I have not been able to trace past like 1880, but that side, my grandmother's side of the family is from North Carolina and Virginia. So I would
Okay.
imagine that
Yeah,
there
yeah.
probably were some enslaved persons, but as is the case, I have not been able, unfortunately, yet. I would love to, do more work on that to really trace back to enslavement. But I imaginally
So
they
you have Jamaican in your blood.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, man, that type thing. Yeah, I love it. Now, what made them move to North Carolina? I mean, to New York. I'm sorry.
I actually don't know really. I mean, I guess just, the history of the Great Migration and, families searching for, a better life is because all I know is my mom says that my great grandmother, came to New York and then just like never left. And all her brothers and sisters, maybe there were 4 or 5 of them came up too. And she
Okay.
really never went back to North Carolina and never talked about it either. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
really don't. She unfortunately passed before I was born. So I didn't get to
Yeah.
learn from her about those decisions.
Is there if you look back in your family, is there something that made you who you are to love education, to love literature? Was there a writer or something like that? Is there something in that?
That's an interesting question. So, my mom was always very, encouraging of me to read, would buy me lots and lots of books and read to me. And I think even when I was like in her belly, she would read to me. So I think she always really encouraged my love of reading. I don't know if there's a specific writer. I did when I was younger read this sort of like Dear America series, that is set. It would just essentially has young girls set in different historical periods. I think most of the ones I read were not Black girls. I felt like there was one or two that were set in slavery, and I knew I didn't want to read those. As a kid, I was like, oh, I didn't want to read those. But I think by the time I got to college, I realized that I had, read a lot of literature that did not reflect me at all. And I really wanted to know more about literature that, reflected, Black experience and history and and culture and all those kinds of things. And my curriculum up until that point, had not reflected that.
Yeah. You got me thinking here, and I got to ask you this question. What does reading do for one? And the reason why I ask that, because if there's somebody watching this and they're raising a kid or something like that, reading is the answer. And I'm going to give you my perspective real quickly. Reading exercises your mind, and it helps you grasp things. Is that, you take it from there?
Take it from there, pass the baton. Okay. I would say, yeah, reading helps you certainly exercise your mind, your imagination, think about alternative ways of thinking about things. One thing that I really think a lot about literature is the way that literature serves as even kind of like, rethinking history, right? When you read specifically even fiction, right? So these things are imagined, but, art imitates life, right? So how do authors reimagine what could be or should be? So I don't know if you've heard of Colson Whitehead's The Underground Railroad, but it's sort of like what you call a neo-slave narrative. So neo-slave narrative is a slave narrative, right? Written by someone who never experienced slavery, right? Written by somebody in the 20th century, in the 21st century. And in it, he imagines that the Underground Railroad was a real physical train. And so it's a real physical train that takes the protagonist to these different states. And she experiences all of these different kinds of sort of like communities, right? And so what he's able to do is he's able to sort of like touch on a larger narrative of the Black experience, almost like a meta version. When you read a traditional slave narrative, right, it's usually a very individual experience. And ultimately, to have been published back then, I mean, even still now to some extent, the publishing industry and a lot of industries are very white and ultimately kind of, impact the narrative and, how narratives are told and all those kinds of things. But in particular, some white person had to essentially kind of say, read this slave narrative. This is going to be, this is going to sort of like draw white empathies and sympathies against slavery, right? And so much of it is about sort of like connecting to white audiences and making them feel guilty. But now in the contemporary moment, you can have these sort of like reimagined slave narratives that think about the larger scope of sort of like Black history, Black experience, and also think about a Black audience, right? In a way that couldn't have happened 100, 150 years ago, right?
I got you.
Yeah. And so I would say that book in particular not only touches on enslavement, but also even thinking about sort of like pushes to sort of like other injustices that have happened to Black people in terms of like experimentation, right? You think of Tuskegee, those kinds of things, these other things that are not slavery, right? Incarceration, these other things that are not slavery, but are another kind of form of sort of like oppression that happened to Black people and how it's in a continuum, right? And so I think that that's really interesting, the way that, contemporary authors are able to kind of like connect, draw a line from the past to the present to even the future, right? And even reimagining the future or not, right? Or thinking about new ways that we could, imagine these things.
Let me ask you this question. What is literature? What is that?
What is literature? Well, I mean, literature is from different kinds of writing, right? You could have essays, fiction, novels, nonfiction, poetry, to some extent, music, right? All of that could be considered sort of like literature. So,
okay, I got you.
Academics sometimes call creative production rather plays. I mean, I think we often think of literature as just novels, but it really could be a broader scope of sort of like writings or creative production that, you interpret and you think about. that all can be kind of encompassed
I
in
got you.
literature.
I got you. Well, okay. How about this one? What is good literature? And let me ask you, and I mean it this way: if I read something and it made my mind go way away, that's good literature, or it made me understand. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, so that's a question my students I ask, think a lot about what is good literature. And that's, I mean, I think that that's complicated. I think also literature, when we think literature's often had this kind of like connotation for being highbrow, right? You think of like, sometimes the books that you see in the supermarket, commercial books, romance novels have historically not been thought of literature because it isn't, sort of got this like literary devices, the kind of
Right,
like
right,
the
right,
audience
right,
it appeals to.
right,
There's a kind of like consideration of the art behind it, right? It's not formulaic, it's not commercial. Literature is supposed to be something that is sort of like art for art's sake, not art for the sake of capitalism, right?
right,
So
right,
I think
right.
that is a difference. But I mean, now the lines are kind of blurry, I think, at
Yeah,
this
yeah.
point.
Oh, really? Okay. Because
Yeah, I would say.
yeah, there have been writers. One of the things that really made, let's say, Ida B. Wells, I would think,
Mhm.
so powerful in her movement and activism is that she wrote down what she was experiencing, what was happening during that time period.
Mhm.
Frederick Douglass, that's what helped him move along. I mean, he wrote his books, he had the magazine. So many people, if they write it down, that takes them a step above, understandably, someone who doesn't.
Right. So historically, and this is where, you have some of the schism, the idea of literature, right, and the word literature comes out of, unfortunately, right, the Western canon. And so in some ways, the literature of our people has not been considered literature, right? It's only recently that it has been. And so even that word, right, has a bit of like contention in thinking about what is and what isn't literature, right? The idea of literature comes out of sort of like the Enlightenment and all of those kinds of things. And so even when we think about what is considered like American literature and the American canon, only in the last 20 years or so has it broadened out, right, to include African American or Latin American writers and thinkers, right, and not to simply be sort of, white,
Right,
old
right,
white writers, right? And so
right,
I think
right,
we're still in the midst of rethinking what it means, right, for something to be great literature. Great literature also has, been, kind of connected to like the human condition, right? So ultimately, something that you read that endures, that speaks to what it is to be human, not just 100 years ago, but even today, right? That has these like tenets of humanity, or work that makes you feel, right? That connects to your humanness, right? And so again, I think for different groups, the idea of what is literature is in some ways fraught, right? Because of that history and tension
right,
of imagining. Toni Morrison has a really impactful book called, I think, Playing in the Dark, that talks about the way the American literary canon, has actually been shaped by this Africanist presence or ghost, or basically the way that whiteness is defined by not being Black, right? And so the ways that, we've always thought, oh, well, the American literary canon is just about whiteness and that's it. And, Black isn't there, but really
right,
it's sort of like the subscript and the subtext. And that's what shapes the ideas of whiteness as being not Black and how they define themselves against a racial other.
right,
So,
right.
there's definitely a lot of a lot to be said about
It,
literature and our ideas of it.
it is literature art.
Yes, literature is art,
So
written art.
if with that being said, and I cannot think of the book, but you'll know when I say it. There was a book. Oh man, it's a famous book where the guy wrote it back in the slave days, and he did not use good grammar. He used grammar of his time. What book is that?
A book where
Yeah.
he didn't use
Oh
good
man,
grammar.
yeah, it was I mean, it was broken sentences and everything. Oh man,
Um, I'm
I'm
not sure. I really am more of a 20th century person.
yeah.
I'm not
Oh shucks.
sure
Yeah.
what
Okay.
book that.
Well, I'll get past that question. But then when you read it, are you looking for complete sentences and the proper use of verbs and adverbs and things of that sort to help you say this was good, or was it because it's art, you, however they wrote it, even if it was incorrect, you still was able to absorb the point?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, however they wrote it, if you still are able to absorb something from it, that does make it still art. I mean, in terms of grammar and those kinds of things, again, I mean, I think that's, it really is kind of a complex question, because ultimately when you kind of like create something that goes through the traditional channels, there are going to be editors or people who like, I mean, we can all make art, right? We can all make art and share
Yes.
art or written art with the world, right? I think that the extent that you're able to kind of and ultimately too, using your own voice is important, and that's where sort of like creative, right, license comes into play, to the extent at which, like, do you want this to be written in a way that is in your voice? Is that what's right, or is that not what's right? You think about
I got you.
Ulysses, which I've never read, which is some famous, sort of like Western canonical book, I think is in all kinds of like really difficult to read, broken up sentences and that kind of stuff. And that's considered like a pinnacle of white Western literature. Similarly, in
Really?
Beloved by Toni Morrison, that ended up getting her the Nobel Prize in Literature, there are parts where she's speaking through the ghost voice, and that is very broken up and miserable to read. I don't know if you read Beloved, but that
No.
is also, I mean, thankfully that's not the whole book, because that's
Yeah.
hard to read. But again, so it really kind of, depends on what you're trying to do and if you feel like it achieves those goals.
Now, there's a different style of between and across the globe of literature. Is that the case?
Yes, yes. I mean, they're different, certainly different ways of writing, especially when you get into different languages, translation, all those kinds of things, for sure.
Uh, you talked about earlier literature from around the diaspora. What does that mean? Yeah, let's go into that.
Yeah, so diaspora, right, is a spread of a people. And so I specifically focus on, right, like a literature from the Black or African diaspora, so people of African descent. In particular, my dissertation was on the memory of the Duvalier dictatorship in Haiti and Haitian migrants. So literature written by Haitian Americans, or sort of like Haitians who had, moved to other places around the world. So yeah, there's definitely different themes and histories, ways of thinking that all kind of like, but also sort of patterns and things that reoccur across books from, people of the Black diaspora. So, I'm teaching in the spring like a West African writers class, West African women writers. I've taught some sort of like Black British books. I've, like I said, my family has some Jamaican ancestry that I am trying to, dig more into. So it's really interesting to see the similarities and the differences, right? I think across people of Black descent.
Do people, like, for example, in Africa write differently? I know the topic is and what they say, I was understand, but do they write differently than people in America? Let's say just Black people, or is there some connection there because that's who our homeland is?
So that's really interesting. That's an interesting question. So I mean, I think there are a couple of different ways to think about this. First, I mean, we should also think about, it's not just about sort of like race, which is like we're all Black people, but also thinking about like nation or nationality, and then ethnic group, right? I feel like
Okay.
people often confuse these things. So Africa has so many different states, and I think when you think about, or really countries, and so I think when you think about the different countries and those languages and the cultural groups, there can be similarities and differences, right, when you dig into those things. So, thinking about an author who's from South Africa versus an author who's Nigerian, they could have some similarities or some differences. Also, depending if they're writing in sort of like a colonizer language, right, like English, or maybe they're writing in French or Dutch or what have you, versus if they're writing in, sort of like their ethnic group native language, right? So there are differences that can, bubble up there. Definitely histories of, colonization and those kinds of things also play into the kind of differences that develop. And also, again, the influences, right? Like if you're thinking about authors who come from like francophone countries that were colonized by France, and so French was like a language versus, African countries that were colonized by the British, and English, they can have differences along those lines of, British influence versus French influence, and those can crop up some of the differences, as well as then getting into sort of like ethnic group differences, right? So there's kind of a couple of different layers, but then the larger racial history, right, of like marginalization, of sort of maybe, colonization, of having to leave wherever they were to go to London or to Paris to get a better education and get a better life, or to try to go to the US, those kinds of things might be similar.
Is there and I'm gonna stay on that just a little bit more. Okay, so if I'm in, I'm in London or I'm in Africa or something like that, and I'm in America, I put a comma at a different place in my writing because I was taught a comma goes somewhere differently. Is that, or is there some universal way, or there's nothing to that?
Down to the commas,
I'm just using
I
that
think.
as an example. I'm just saying sentence
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
structure and that
I
kind of
mean,
thing.
there are certain things that are like a little bit different in different languages. I mean, in terms of like British English versus American English, I don't know so much. But, even like, in Europe and the French, where we use periods, maybe not in the sentences, but in terms of like even talking about money, right? If I had $52, 52.50, right? They use a comma and we use a period. So I mean,
Okay.
so there's certain differences. I mean, I don't really
Okay.
sort of like know them all. I'm pretty fluent in reading French and somewhat in speaking, but some of the like grammatical differences I've forgotten a bit. But about a decade ago, I studied abroad in Paris and I took a lot of French grammar classes. I'm not as familiar right now, but yeah, there
Okay.
definitely are certain differences that vary. That once you get into kind of like the language, you'll really learn.
When you read across the diaspora these different books, is there some commonality? Life for people is the same all over the world, I would guess. I mean, you want to eat, drink, sleep, party,
Exactly.
yeah.
The
But
human
there are
experience.
some other things that are different because of the culture. That helps
Hmm.
you understand that in their writing and what they write about.
Yeah. Yeah, there's certainly right again those human tenets of right like love, betrayal, anger. Those human emotions certainly are excuse me are the same. But then of course the culture and even I think sometimes across the culture again, there are a lot of similarities. It's funny. I have a friend who's Jamaican and Ghanaian. And his parents met at Cornell in college, and he says they were like. Oh, our cultures are kind of similar, like Jamaica and Ghana. And that's how they sort of, came to be together. And I think there are quite a few Ghanaians who were brought to Jamaica during the enslavement, right? So there are ways that, even across the diaspora, there's certain things we do or music that, are, that endure, right? And those similarities are there. Even when you think about languages like, Haitian Creole or Jamaican Patois, those are essentially colonizer languages mixed in with sort of like African language phonetics and things like that. So there is right these remnants of right sort of like and these new mixtures that come out of sort of Black people being put in new and different places around the world, but still some of their history and culture from the motherland still endures in certain ways. That's not entirely sort of like my background in terms of doing
Right.
research, but I do know of that.
Right. And one of the things that you talked about earlier again also, and I want to touch on this, is Haiti.
Mhm.
What's the experiences and what's the stories there from Haiti that you want to share?
So particularly for my dissertation and what I did a lot of research on was the Duvalier dictatorship, which was perhaps the most recent dictatorship in Haiti that lasted from about I believe like 1957 to 1986. And it's interesting because the dictatorship for a very long time was supported by the U.S. And supported by as the U.S. has supported many sort of like problematic and vicious governments and regimes across sort of like Latin America and other sort of what then would have been thought of as like developing countries. And so really, what I started this project thinking about Haitian migrants, right, that I'd seen in other books. You see, Haitians, because right, we always hear like Haiti is, the poorest nation in the Western Hemisphere.
Yeah,
But why
Haiti gets a beating.
they do. And so it's like, well, but wait, why is Haiti so poor? Right. And when you
Right.
really kind of dig into it, there are so many things that has made it difficult for Haiti, right, to do well as the first Black nation, right? From the US refusing to recognize Haiti as a nation, right? Because the US was like, oh no, like, we don't want the Black people here to get no ideas, right, and try to form their own nation. So the US did not, recognize Haiti as a nation until the Civil War, from the fact that Haiti was made to sort of pay back debt to France,
Okay,
and
let me
because
stop
France
you
was
there.
sort of
Let me
like,
stop you there. I mean, no disrespect, but I got to ask, what's the story about Haiti? What is Haiti? Yeah, tell us a little bit of the history why Haiti is the first nation and that for those who may not know.
so for those who may not know, right, Haiti is the first Black nation, or the first Black republic. Haiti had overthrown the French and Napoleon to become sort of like the largest, most successful slave rebellion, right, to become
Yeah.
its own nation in 1804. Haiti, many people don't know this as well. Haiti actually shares the island with the Dominican Republic, and
Right.
Haiti and DR have tensions ongoing to this day, where sort of like Haitian migrants in search of a better life go to DR, right, to work, and are often sort of deported or treated poorly, again because of Haiti's history as sort of the Blacker nation, a nation of enslaved peoples. So yeah, 1804, Haiti becomes the first Black republic, and it is forced to repay debt to France. France essentially says, like, we're losing a lot of money because you won't be slaves anymore. So you need to pay us back this money that we've lost. And because they don't have the money to pay them back, they actually have to take out loans from them to repay them. So it's sort of like this double debt. So that's what sort of starts off. Really, yeah. I can send you a video about it, a YouTube video I showed to my students about it. And so this is what, right, this is already, setting them back, right? As well as, the US won't recognize them as a nation. And so then, moving towards the 20th century, they are, crippled by greed and corruption, but already you honestly have like a crabs in a barrel situation, right? You've got so little resources and not enough to share, that ultimately this, pushes forward like corruption and all these kinds of issues, to the point where in the 20th century, around the beginning of the 1900s, the US has a military occupation of Haiti that ends up, harming it in other ways, but setting up a military that will then sort of lead to further sort of military-led coups and more sort of instability that will lead you into the Duvalier dictatorships from 1957 to 1986. And I think that's maybe one of the longest dictatorships, in part because it was supported by the US. And the US supports the Duvalier dictatorship for so long because it's the Cold War era. And so the US says, we need, a defense against communism in Cuba. So the US is kind of like, you know what, Haiti is good as long as you're not going to be communist. Like, no, don't ask, don't tell. Like, if you're harming your own people, or, your ruthless, vicious things are happening, you've got sort of death squads, all this kind of stuff. Like, they're kind of turning a blind eye as long as they keep not being communist and promise to sort of be a wall against communism. And so to that end, when the dictatorship gets more violent, and perhaps you remember in the sort of like 80s and 90s, really starting in the 70s, you see Haitians coming, the Haitian boat crisis, you see Haitians coming in those really rickety boats to the US, into Florida. Yep. When you see them coming, the US doesn't want to give them, what's the word, asylum, because of the friendship with the Haitian government. We are friendly with the Haitian government and don't want to recognize that, it's a bad situation happening there. And so that's why they're sending them back and saying that they're only economic refugees, that they're just looking for better jobs. They're not, escaping political terror, even though they are. Whereas with the Cubans, they recognize the political terror because it's communism. They want to say, oh, look how bad communism is. And so that creates this sort of divide. And to this day, in the post 1986 aftermath, Haiti continues to have political instability. And, people continue to flee Haiti. And maybe just in 2021, the president was assassinated. And I think the capital has been sort of overtaken by gang violence. So it's been this kind of like cyclical nature where Haiti has not been able to kind of be able to find, stability. And it's also in part because the US, whenever it helps Haiti, also sort of, sets up these, negotiations that, kind of leave Haiti with the short end of the stick in terms of, trades and stuff like that.
Now, and so how about this one? Is it right to say we should be most proud of Haiti than any place else in the world, almost?
We should. Haiti really did. We should be really proud of Haiti for its ability. Haiti was like ahead of the curve. You think about all of these African countries that get independence, or will attempt to, because they get, again, the way that our current, financial world order is, none of that has really changed. So even though many African countries now are independent, in some ways, the way that the money works and the capitalism works, who's holding the purse strings is still the same people. Right. Yeah. But certainly Haiti was ahead of its time in trying to strike out on its own. But again, the way that the world order was such, coming into capitalism and the Western world, Western capitalism, they could not really sort of, exist. Right. But we should be very proud of Haiti for sure.
Okay, and I think I'm summing it up in this way. We should be proud of him. Haiti people said we're gonna fight for it. We're gonna be independent. We're gonna do our own thing. And then as a result of that, the powers that be, the Europeans and Americans, and so still stuck their hand in there and said, okay, we're not gonna buy nothing from you. We're not gonna help you, so on and so forth.
Right. They said you're on your own. And then they said basically, okay, if you want our help, it's going to come at a cost, right? It's going to
Yes.
come at a cost that really kind of like advantages us. And then even when you think about, right, after the earthquake and all of those things, right, all of this international aid was supposed to pour into Haiti, but ultimately a lot of it has gone to some of these like international NGOs and things like that. So it really doesn't quite reach the people on the ground, right? All of
Okay.
this money
Okay.
that's supposed to help doesn't really kind of like, actually reach those people, as well as, again, some of the corporate, or rather some of the corrupt elite are again being supported by, you know, the Western world.
Okay, I got you.
The son dictator, they called him the father-son dictatorship from 1957 to 1986, is Papa and Baby Doc Duvalier.
I
Baby
remember that
Doc, when he
name.
was finally yeah, when he was finally exiled and there were all these protests, he fled to France, right, in like an Air Force One plane. Supposedly he'd stolen millions of dollars from the country. And then he just was in France, chilling. And so you think about, and part of what my dissertation and my work doing my doctorate was thinking about this idea, right, that like this dictator is allowed to just hang out in France, right? All of these, crimes against his people, on his reputation. And France doesn't tell him, okay, well, you got to go. You're a legal immigrant. All these
Right.
other poor illegal immigrants, they're like, okay, yeah, no, you can't stay
Yeah, I
here.
got you. I
This
got
wealthy one, they're like, you know what? Hey, do
you.
what you do.
Let me ask you this. Have you, and I know, I'm sure you have you read a book, and again, I'm sure you have, someone who lives in Haiti who tells of their story living there? Is it a good life for them? They can go and they can, maybe go to college and make some of their lives. Have there been someone read that says, this is what I go through on a daily basis almost? This is what my life is here?
So Haiti has a really high illiteracy rate. A lot of the books are in French. The most famous Haitian American author, or well known as Edwidge Donicat, who I study. I would say the majority of Haiti is illiterate or poor, right? Like, they make $1 or $2 a day. However, there is, like any place, and increasingly so many places in the world have this vast inequality. There is a wealthy elite class, who, probably are college educated, who are doing
Right,
well. There's maybe a smidgen of sort of like a working or a middle class or a mercantile class, but the vast majority of people, right, are working, making very, very little. And that is not, I think that is perhaps not a realistic option.
right.
In terms of the books, and again, too, I mean, again, to be able to write novels and to be able to write novels that are findable by someone in the US, or that, kind of reach a global audience, often comes with a kind of privilege, right? And so that's another thing to kind of to be
Yeah,
recognized.
yeah,
I've got I think I left it somewhere. A
yeah.
friend of mine recently translated a book, A Son to Be Sown, which is by a Haitian author. And I can send you a link to it. I
Okay.
mean, it's not quite sort of like it's not quite sort of like a nonfiction book, but it is a fiction book about a boy in the slums that recently came out
Oh,
in Haiti.
well, okay. Because of the readings from the diaspora, what's the best place for a Black person to
That's
live?
a really good question. A few years ago, I had gone to South Africa and I'd asked, and I mean, and that's a few years ago, and every few years things change. But I asked a friend of my mother's, would you say that South Africa, post apartheid, post sort of like the war they had, the end of the 90s, is a place, is not so committed to white supremacy, is a good place to be for a Black person? And she said yes, she thought so. Um, but it is a really important question, right? Where's a good place to be? I think some in South Africa might argue something different. Um, that is such a hard question, because you've got so many dynamics to think about, from racial inequality to also like what is the likelihood of upward economic mobility.
Right.
I think in the US historically there's always been, right, what W.E.B. Du Bois talks about as a talented tenth, or exceptional Black people, that the US has said, look, we're not racist. Look at these Black people doing well. Your Beyonces and your Jay-Z's. Of course, they weren't making exceptional money like Beyonce and
Sure,
Jay-Z, but
sure.
there have always been Black people who've been able to do really, really, really well, where the majority of people are probably not doing so great. And I think that is unfortunately the reality for many people in many countries. So I think that those are some of the factors to consider. But yeah, I'm still thinking about that myself. Where's the best where's the best place to be as a Black person?
I've been to London a few times. I guess it's good in London, but to me, the upper mobility is not the best.
Yeah, I think you know what's interesting about Europe, and I, have done some research on this, is that ultimately, Europe has long had this rep for being not racist, right? Because they have almost like a colorblind mentality, blah blah blah, and that's because African Americans, often creators and writers, have been able to go there and sort of feel like, oh, it's not the same, it's not as awfully racist as the U.S. But the difference is that when you are a migrant to a different place, sometimes being a migrant gives you certain privileges that being from that place doesn't, essentially. And so, you think about, right, like Josephine Baker or Richard Wright, these people who went to France and were like, oh, yeah, France is great. But meanwhile, the French are terrorizing the Francophone Africans and Caribbeans. So again, some of it is also about like your positionality to that state in your history. Even when you think about in the US now, when you think about some of the students you see getting a lot of these sort of like full ride scholarships, there are a lot of students who, right, they come from recent Black migrant backgrounds, right? So their parents are maybe African or Caribbean or what have you, but it's much harder for sort of like African American students, I think, to find mobility to do well. So I think there's these ways in which states sort of in the name of being not racist will say, oh, look, we're supporting diversity, but really they're supporting diversity of Black people they have not historically harmed.
Yeah, I
And so I
got
think that also creates a difference there.
just a few more questions. Can a white person, or have you read a book written by a white person that gave a really good account of Black life and what white people did to Black people? Or
That
could
is,
or could
mhm.
or they still slant that somehow? I mean, yeah, go ahead with that.
That's interesting. I mean, I think there are probably some really great white American historians, none that I can think of the top of my head. But I think, again, there's just a couple of different things to think about too. Are we talking nonfiction? Are we talking history? Are we talking literature?
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
in terms of
Okay.
fiction, I think again, there are a lot of, again, my students, I talk a lot about this, about the kind of like the ethics of storytelling, right? And like, what does it mean? Who should tell what stories? What are your motivations? What are your intentions? And then what
Right.
might come out unintentionally? So I think it's possible, certainly, to tell histories and to tell histories, to tell nonfiction that is really useful and helpful. But I think sometimes you just have to be very aware, and it also is about the research you do, and are you uplifting specific people's voices, or are you kind of like telling it in your own voice? I think those are some of
Yeah.
the really important questions to ask, because if you're really just creating a platform to uplift other people's stories, then of course, certainly. But if you are going to kind of tell it in your voice and in your perspective, that's where things might get a little a
Yeah.
little fuzzy.
Yeah. It's funny. I interviewed a guy. He wrote a book. White guy. He wrote a book that he found out that his grandfather was in the KKK and killed the guy.
Wow.
And it was so amazing for him. And he tells his story. Everybody is, look for that video on the channel. And but he had to give his heart into that as a white person.
Hmm.
That's a real talent or something like that for them to be able to say, I know that I'm gonna take a hit for this. People are gonna dislike me for what I've written, but I am telling it correctly.
Well, I think, too much of the focus sometimes about history and about the history of Black white tension is about, white people's feelings of guilt. Okay, you feel guilty, but what happens after that? What are you going to do? Because I feel like what happens with the guilt conversation is then there's all this shame, and people don't want to feel shame. They don't want to feel bad. But it's like, okay, you feel guilty, you feel bad. But then what happens next, right? Like, it's normal to feel shame about things or feel bad about things. And it's like, you have to get over that and then think about, okay, what happens next? What are you going to do to make the world better? What are you going to do with that information? How are you going to activate from that, as opposed to just feeling guilty and then now feeling angry because you feel guilty, or feeling sad because now this is rechange your image of yourself or maybe your family or whoever. I think that is ultimately where too much of the conversation derails and goes, or people want to wallow in like, oh, no, I have a bad history, or like I'm a bad person, or maybe my family were bad people. And it's like, okay, maybe they were, but honestly, everybody, surely you do a little digging, you can find family members who did some, who did some questionable things. You think about the Duvalier dictatorship, you think about some of these, these dictatorships, people have done things against their own people, right, that are harmful and violent and terrible. But and you have to grapple with that, and then also think about, okay, well, what happens next, right? Like, what do we do next to prevent those kinds of atrocities, not just feel bad and upset that like it happened.
Right. Yeah. Well, very good point. What is have you written books yourself?
That's next on the to-do list, turning
Okay.
my dissertation into a book. I've written some book chapters and some essays, but no, my book is forthcoming.
Yeah, okay, we're gonna love that. Yeah, we're gonna stay in touch. You can come back anytime. What when you read, how do you read? You can you read to the radio? I used to study. I had the music on. Am I able to read to the radio? As an expert yourself, or do I
I
need to
think
have peace and quiet so that I can absorb completely what I read?
everyone is different. I think I know I can only read to music that doesn't have lyrics, because lyrics will distract me.
Yeah,
Personally, I think everyone is different, but I do think it's probably easier to really focus and you get your deepest dive when don't have like other words, because your
yes,
brain is like going to be trying to like hear and understand those. Some people are better than others. I think everyone's on the spectrum and how much they can drown out
yeah,
outside noise. But I know, if there's words, I'm like, oh,
yes,
what's that? Right.
yeah, yeah,
I
right,
personally also I have to write in everything I read. I think that helps me kind of like muscle memory and makes me kind of like really engage with the text more, like annotating in that way. I think that there's probably like a generational digital divide in terms of how much certain students who've grown up now on tablets and stuff like that are used to like handwriting, because they do so much more online. But I think for anyone pre like 2000 or so, you grew up having to write a lot in school. And so writing really helps you think. It's almost like a muscle memory thing. I mean, for students
yes,
who grew up digitally, really doing a lot of stuff on computer, I don't know if it might be different from them because they did not get as much of that muscle memory. We
yes,
had a computer class, once maybe a week or something when I was growing up. We did everything handwritten, right? And so I think
yes.
again,
I agree
that
with
is
you there.
how I'm accustomed to, right? Like thinking through my ideas is through writing.
Okay, I got one more that popped up on me. What's your take on what my man trying to do down there in Florida into the history? Is that going to make people read more? Is that because there are efforts and everybody again on the show we just thorough. I interviewed a lady who and several people who are fighting against that movement. Um, that's going to excite more fight against the movement. What's your take on that?
I mean, I think history, I can't think of the quote where it's sort of like history is this kind of like back and forth battles, right? Essentially. So I'm surely there's always going to be, right, sort of like this push and pull. And surely, right, this is going to spur more people to read, to share about books. I was just at a really amazing event for the start of Banned Book Week from African American Policy Forum, Kimberly Crenshaw's organization that and she's based at a Columbia couple weeks ago around the Brooklyn Book Festival. So yeah, I mean, there's going to be sort of like, a response, a pushback, and we need to, right, be sharing more, right, more stories, more books, thinking more about, right, these things aren't just going to sort of like people's experiences and histories aren't just going to go away because you don't want to share them, right? That's not
Right.
how any of this works. And so, I mean, it's sort of foolish to censor and repress, but we see governments historically have always done that kind of thing, and there is always a resistance. So yeah, there's going to be certainly pushback, and proliferation of more reading and writing in response.
Yeah. Do you have last question in your house? You got a big library of books on the
I
shelves.
do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
I
love
have a
it.
lot of books at this point, certainly. As a professor too, you can kind of get sort of like exam copies and stuff like that.
Yes.
I do sometimes like write like book reviews and stuff like that. I read a book by Marita Golden about a family where the husband had Alzheimer's, and I'd written this book review about it, or this kind of like personal essay book review, because it's really interesting. Black people are overrepresented in having Alzheimer's and the dementia and things like that, including in my own family, and that was of interest to me. So yeah, I'm always interested in the nexus of sort of like Black experience and identity and other social issues, right? And certainly books that are telling that story or thinking about that story or reframing those stories. So yeah, I got a lot of books.
Yeah. Just two more because you jamming. How often do you read a book? Do you like every Friday night or every Saturday or something like that? You have a time that I'm gonna sit here and read something that I like to read. How do you do that?
Well, you know what's funny is I feel like I read a lot. I don't necessarily, I've been reading a little bit more lately too, but in terms of like completing a whole new book, it really kind of depends. I mean, I'm always kind of reading, especially with the work that I do,
Yeah.
but more and more, I think I'm trying to find time like right before bed. I used to love to read before bed as a
Oh,
kid. And so now
really?
I'm trying to get back into sort of like whatever book I personally want to read. I actually just finished The Changeling, which is a show that just came out on Apple Plus with
Yes.
Lakeith Stanfield. I haven't watched it yet, but I read the book. It's supposed to be like a modern fairy tale set in New York City by what's his name? Laval. I forgot his first name, Laval. But
Yes.
it's really
Yes.
good. I really liked it. So yeah, again, I like try to read before bed, and I'm really interested in, again, and especially in fiction and like creatives and the way that they are reimagining these different kinds of stories. I mean, The Changeling was amazing. You've got like these new parents, and you know, some of it is a commentary on being, you know, Black parents in New York City. I think about what it means, right, to be a Black parent, to protect your child against the monsters of the world, both real and imagined. So there's a
Right.
way that it's fantastical, but there's also a way that's literal, right? Because you think about the safety of a Black child and how much harder it is to protect your child. You think about like Tamir Rice, these unfortunate, you know,
Right.
shootings, or
Right.
you know, even sort of the violence that exists in Black communities where young boys are sort of snatched up in gangs or shot, all this kind of stuff. What does it mean to protect Black children? And there's a way that fiction and fantasy kind of reimagines that, both in the literal and in the fantastic, that I
I
think
love
is
it.
really poignant.
All right, one more. Since you're an expert, what would you tell some parent to make sure that they start their kid off reading?
What they start their kid off reading
Yeah,
with?
to make them read. Because I there you go.
You know what I will tell you to do that I saw on Instagram that just scandalized me is that some of our children's Black books are written by white authors. And so what I would tell you is to look up every single author for every, because you know there's become a increased proliferation of, you know, Black children's books, because of, you know, there was a lack, right? I know when I was growing up there weren't too many, but now, you know, there has been increased number of Black children's books. But I saw on Instagram, you know, little like bookstagram, that someone was saying, you know, don't get fooled. A lot of these are written by white authors, I guess, who are trying to fill in the gap and trying to make a little, you know, a little money. So I would say definitely get your children Black books where they're represented, but also do your research to Google those authors. Don't just look at the cover and say, oh, there's a Black book on this cover, it was probably written by a Black person, because maybe not. And I think in some ways, you know, to the point again you asked earlier about white people writing Black books, it feels a little uncomfortable. I forget what some of the
Really?
books.
Oh, I love it.
Yeah, you got to look into that. I feels a little uncomfortable to think about. I forget, was it something? My friend, I've got a lot. I don't have any children, but I have a lot of friends with young children at this point,
Sure,
you
sure,
know. And so one of my friends was like, "Oh no, not what was her name? Glam, Mary's little Glam, I think was one of them." And it's
sure.
like that feels a little like stereotypical. Now that you know it wasn't written by a Black person, you feel a little like, this, you know,
I
it
got
feels
you.
different, right? It feels a little stereotypical. It feels like, oh, I know what's gonna hit. You know, it feels a little off. And
Yes,
so
yes, yes,
I think, you know, just if you're buying your children books, I would say Google the authors to see,
yes,
it might make
yes.
you feel differently about the story that's being told. Because again, right, like, you know, perception is everything. And then finally, to the extent that you can kind of get them to read ahead, my mom was always obsessed with trying to get me to be ahead. She always was thinking ahead. And I think that's good too, to get your child to be reading, you know, a few levels up and that stuff, to always be a
Oh,
little
I
bit
love it. I love it. I love it. Because I mean, especially the boys. The boys, if we could get these young men to read, um, and then they would do better in school and so on and so forth. That I think that's the point I'm trying to make here.
Yeah, certainly,
Yeah,
certainly.
yeah,
Men in general, but especially Black men, are sort of like
yes,
underrepresented in our educational systems and are sort
yes,
of like falling behind. So
yeah. We need to do
certainly.
that. All right, thank you so very much for coming on the show. We covered a lot. We went around, but you explained it so eloquently
Thank you.
that people, y'all hear what, if you don't get nothing else out of this, read. That's the cancer. Her parents, mom, dad, what have you, said read. and you sat there. Now, because you read, this is another question. Did that make you a nerd? Did that make you where you didn't have social skills? If I may ask, I ain't trying to say that. Did that do something in that regard, or you still was able to do both?
You know what? My mom put me in a lot of activities as well, little after school activities. And I actually think I did a lot of acting as a little kid. And I think that was really helpful for like my
Okay,
public speaking, for my memory,
okay,
for engaging people. So I think that
okay.
that made me counterbalance. Although she did sometimes would be like, put away that book at the dinner table, or like, oh, here you are reading again in the car. I've
Oh,
created a
so it was that
bookmark.
intense. Yeah, that was that
But
intense. I got you. But
but
that,
but I
but it
did.
didn't stop you. Yeah.
Yeah, but it did balance out in other ways because, I did sports. I used to be a volleyball player. So I kind of
Okay.
was well-rounded in the end. But
I love it.
so yeah, I think the well-roundedness kind of helped balance it out for sure. But I certainly did love to read.
Let us know about the book and all that else that you do. Is there some way I can promote you? Like, do you have a podcast or something? I know you teach at what university are you at?
I'm at Lemoyne College in Syracuse.
Okay. And so and what do you call yourself? Are you, I mean, I know you're a professor, but are you a something else? Is there another title to what you are?
Well, I'm a professor. Technically, my title at Lemoyne is Assistant Professor of English and 75th Endowed Professor of the Humanities. I would say like I'm a scholar of race and
There
Black
you go.
literature.
There you go. Hey, that's what I was looking for. And a scholar.
Yes,
I love
a
it.
scholar.
I got a scholar in front of me.
Yeah, I can
Everybody.
also send you my Instagram and LinkedIn and
Yes.
Twitter. You have my
Yeah.
Twitter for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Yeah. We'll put that on there. Everybody, you heard what she said. Read. You got it straight, no tracing from her. I just tried to, and I didn't have to get it out of her because you could feel it. It made her who she is. And well-rounded too. So you can't run no okey doke on her, I'm sure, because you didn't read about it. You're like, I done read the okey doke stories. Can't do that. And so that's the catch out of this. That's what we're getting. It's the history that is chronicled in them books. You can read it so you'll understand what they trying new in another way. That's all they're doing. And then you'll know how to be proud of yourself that does that. You'll read some of those stories of what has happened before you that the shoulders you stand on today is in those books. And then everybody, it makes you exercise your mind. So you're smarter. I think that sums it up. Everybody, oh, check it out. I got a children's book coming out in the next couple of weeks titled They Did It, about 30 rich Black people that lived in the 1800s. They were business owners. Watch for that, my friends, because I'm giving you this history one way or the other. You got to get this stuff. Follow this sister. Watch my movie, read my book, the Black Business book, and the children's book that's coming out. And then tell somebody about us. Hit the like button because there is no love button on Strong Inspirations on this show. I know you liked it. You can feel the passion. And to you, my sister, I say this and I mean this with all sincerity. I really do. I want you to stay strong, stay safe, stay on your grind. I love what you're doing. You're proud of yourself. Just nod. Yes, I know you are. Because you come from where you come from to where you are. You're good at it too. And you read them difficult books. Them books be a lot of pages. I know they are. You do that too well, eloquently. Everybody, thank you for watching. Thank you for being on here. Strong Inspirations. Bye-bye.